This is where it ends.
The kitchen clock read 2:17 a.m. when I heard Jenna's car pull into our driveway. I'd been sitting at the breakfast table for the past hour, nursing my third cup of coffee and staring at the credit card statement I'd found buried in her desk drawer. The numbers didn't lie, even if my wife had been lying for months. I heard her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, that careful tiptoeing she'd perfected over the past 6 months. She thought I was asleep. She thought I was stupid. Maybe I had been, but not anymore. Alec? Her voice carried that fake sweetness she used when she felt guilty. What are you doing up so late? I looked up from my coffee, meeting her eyes with the coldest stare I could muster. Practicing for when you're gone? The coffee cup slipped from her manicured fingers, shattering against the tile floor in an explosion of ceramic and lukewarm coffee. Her face went pale, and for just a moment I saw genuine fear flicker across her features. What do you mean by that? She stammered, bending down to pick up the larger pieces. Leave it, I said, not moving from my chair. You'll cut yourself. Wouldn't want to explain dark stains to clay, would you? She froze, a shard of ceramic halfway to her palm. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. I slid the credit card statement across the table. $2,000 at the Ocean View Beach House rental. Funny thing is, you told me you were at a marketing conference in Portland that weekend. Jenna straightened slowly, her lawyer instincts kicking in. She'd always been quick on her feet, which made her so good at her job at Morrison & Associates Marketing. It also made her a talented liar. That was a client entertainment expense, she said, smoothing down her black pencil skirt. Clay thought it would be better to meet somewhere more private to discuss the Henderson account. Clay Harlan. I let his name hang in the air like a bad smell. Your boss. The same Clay who's been calling you at midnight for the past 3 months. The same Clay whose cologne I smell on your clothes when you come home from these client meetings. You're being paranoid, Alec. Just because your little print shop is failing doesn't mean you should take it out on my career. There it was. The dig about my business. Moreland Custom Printing wasn't failing, but it wasn't making the kind of money Jenna had grown accustomed to when I was still climbing the corporate ladder at her agency. I'd left that world behind 2 years ago, tired of the backstabbing and politics. Now I wondered if I just made it easier for her to stab me in the back. My paranoia has nothing to do with this. I stood up towering over her 5'6" frame, but it has everything to do with the fact that my wife has been screwing her boss and thinking I'm too stupid to notice. I'm not having this conversation at 2 a.m, she said, turning toward the stairs. You're drunk. I'm stone cold sober, Jenna. Clearer than I've been in months. She paused at the bottom of the staircase, her hand gripping the banister. We'll talk about this tomorrow when you're being rational. No, we won't, because tomorrow you'll have another excuse, another lie, another reason why I'm the problem. I walked to the kitchen window and stared out at our quiet neighborhood in Rivermouth, Maine. But I'm done being the problem. I'm done being the fool. Alec, please. Go to bed, Jenna. Dream about Clay. Practice for when you're gone, because that day is coming sooner than you think. She stood there for another minute, probably calculating her next move, then disappeared upstairs. I heard our bedroom door close, followed by the soft click of the lock. She'd never locked that door before. I swept up the broken coffee cup and poured the rest of my coffee down the sink. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering evidence. Tomorrow, I'd begin planning my revenge. But tonight, I'd practice being alone in my own house. It felt surprisingly liberating. The next morning, Jenna left for work without saying a word. She grabbed a travel mug of coffee, kissed my cheek with the mechanical affection of a well-trained wife, and walked out the door like nothing had happened. But I noticed she'd changed the password on her phone. I arrived at Moreland Custom Printing at 8:30, same as always. The shop occupied the ground floor of an old textile mill that had been converted into small business spaces. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and it kept food on the table. You look like heck, boss, Eddie Kowalski said as I unlocked the front door. Eddie was my only full-time employee, a 60-year-old former union printer who knew more about the business than I ever would. He also knew everyone in Rivermouth and had an ear for gossip that rivaled any small-town barber. Rough night, I muttered, firing up the computers and checking our job queue for the day. Woman troubles? Eddie poured himself coffee from the pot he'd started before I arrived. I saw your missus downtown yesterday, all dressed up fancy. She was getting into some expensive car with a guy in a suit. Figured it was business. I looked up from the computer screen. What kind of car? Silver BMW, new one. Guy looked like he spent more on his haircut than I spend on groceries. Eddie shrugged. None of my business, but she seemed pretty friendly with him. Yeah, she's friendly with lots of people. I pulled up our invoice from Morrison and Associates. We'd been doing their printing for the past year, ever since Jenna convinced them to give me a chance. Now I wondered what else she'd been doing to secure their business. The morning passed slowly. I printed wedding invitations for a young couple who couldn't stop smiling at each other and business cards for a new restaurant that probably wouldn't last 6 months. Normal work for normal people living normal lives. I envied them. At lunch, I drove to Morrison and Associates. The agency occupied the top 3 floors of a glass and steel building downtown. All modern furniture and expensive art. I'd been there dozens of times for company parties and client events, back when I thought I was part of Jenna's world. I parked across the street and waited. At 12:45, Jenna emerged from the building with Clay Harlan. Even from a distance, I could see the way she touched his arm, the way she laughed at whatever he was saying. They walked to his BMW. Eddie had been right about the car, and drove away together. I followed them at a distance, my old Ford pickup blending into traffic. They drove to the Rivermouth Marina, parked near the expensive boats, and walked toward a restaurant that charged $30 for a sandwich. I found a spot where I could watch them through the restaurant's windows. They sat close together, too close for a business lunch. Clay's hand rested on Jenna's thigh under the table. She leaned into him when she laughed, her fingers playing with the buttons on his shirt. It was like watching a movie of my marriage dissolving in real time. I took pictures with my phone, dozens of them. The quality wasn't great, but they clearly showed my wife being intimate with another man. In Maine, adultery might not matter much in divorce court, but it would matter to Clay's wife and to the board of directors at Morrison and Associates. They finished lunch and walked toward the marina. Clay led her to a cabin cruiser moored at the end of the dock, a 40-foot yacht that probably cost more than my house. They disappeared below deck for 20 minutes. When they emerged, Jenna was adjusting her blouse and Clay was grinning like a teenager. I drove back to the shop feeling sick to my stomach. It was one thing to suspect your wife was cheating. It was another to watch it happen in broad daylight. "You look worse than you did this morning," Eddie observed when I walked in. "I feel worse." I sat down at my desk and stared at the photos on my phone. "Eddie, you still talk to Frank Morrison, right?" Frank Morrison was Eddie's cousin, a former Rivermouth police detective who'd retired early and started his own private investigation business. He specialized in insurance fraud and cheating spouses, which made him perfect for my situation. "Sure do. Why?" "I might need his help with something personal." Eddie nodded slowly. "Frank's good people. Discreet, and he owes me a favor or two. Set up a meeting, tonight, if possible." "You sure about this, Alec? Sometimes it's better not to know." I looked at the photos again, zooming in on my wife's face as she laughed at something Clay had whispered in her ear. "I already know, Eddie. Now I need proof." That evening, I met Frank Morrison at Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar near the waterfront that served cheap beer and minded its own business. Frank was a big man with gray hair and tired eyes, the kind of guy who'd seen too much of humanity's worst behavior. "Eddie says you need help with a cheating wife," he said without preamble. "I need documentation, photos, records, whatever it takes. That'll cost you. My daily rate is 300 plus expenses. How long will it take?" Frank shrugged. "Depends on how careful they're being. From what Eddie tells me, they're not being very careful at all." I slid an envelope across the table containing $1,500 in cash. "Get me everything. Phone records, credit card statements, hotel receipts, photos. I want to know every lie she's told and every place they've been together." "What's your end game here, Alec? You planning to take her to court?" "I'm planning to destroy her," I said. "Completely and publicly. She thinks I'm some pathetic fool who will just roll over and take it. She's about to learn how wrong she is." Frank pocketed the envelope. "I'll start tomorrow. Give me 2 weeks and you'll have enough evidence to bury them both." As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. Jenna was practicing for when I was gone, all right. But she had no idea I was practicing for when she was gone too. Frank Morrison was as good as his reputation. Within a week, he'd compiled a dossier on my wife's affair that read like a bad romance novel. Photos of Jenna and Clay at restaurants, hotels, and on his boat. Credit card records showing purchases of lingerie, expensive wine, and weekend getaways. Phone records documenting hundreds of calls and text messages between them, often late at night while I was sleeping in the next room. The most damning evidence was a recording Frank had made of Jenna and Clay at the Ocean View Beach House. He'd planted a listening device in Clay's BMW during one of their lunch dates, and the audio quality was crystal clear. God, I can't wait until this is over. Jenna's voice came through my laptop speakers as I listened to the recording in my office at the print shop. What do you mean? Clay asked. Living with Alec, pretending to be the dutiful wife. He's so pathetic, Clay. He actually thinks his little printing business matters. He thinks he matters. Why don't you just divorce him? Because I need his signature on some documents first. The house is in both our names, and there are some business assets I need to access. Once I have what I need, I'll file for divorce and take him for everything. What about the kids? What about them? Alec can have custody if he wants. I'll be too busy with my new life to worry about soccer practice and parent-teacher conferences. I stopped the recording and sat back in my chair. Our kids, Emma, 12, and Jake, 10, were spending the week at my mother's house in Bar Harbor. They had no idea their mother was planning to abandon them along with me. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. I'd known about the affair, but hearing Jenna dismiss our entire family as inconvenient obstacles was devastating. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning to destroy everything we'd built together, but two could play that game. I spent the next few days studying the evidence Frank had gathered. Clay Harlan wasn't just Jenna's lover. He was also involved in some questionable business practices at Morrison & Associates. The agency had been overbilling clients and skimming money from advertising budgets, using the profits to fund Clay's lavish lifestyle. Jenna knew about it because she was helping him cook the books. That gave me leverage I hadn't expected. If I played this right, I could destroy both of them professionally as well as personally. My first move was subtle. I printed copies of the most incriminating financial documents and mailed them anonymously to 3 members of Morrison & Associates' board of directors. I included a note suggesting they might want to audit the agency's books more carefully. My second move was more direct. I called Clay's wife, Patricia, and asked to meet with her privately. Patricia Harlan lived in a mansion overlooking Penobscot Bay, the kind of house that screamed old money and social status. She was an elegant woman in her early 40s, with the kind of understated beauty that came from good genes and expensive maintenance. When I explained why I'd come to see her, she listened with the composure of someone who'd suspected the truth for a long time. I wondered when someone would finally tell me, she said, pouring tea in her sun-filled living room. Clay's been having affairs for years, but he's usually more discreet about it. You're not surprised? Disappointed, but not surprised. Clay thinks he's irresistible to women. The sad thing is, many of them seem to agree with him. She studied the photos Frank had taken. Your wife is quite beautiful. I can see why he'd be attracted to her. What are you going to do? Patricia smiled, and for the first time, I saw steel beneath her refined exterior. I'm going to divorce him and take half of everything he owns. But first, I'm going to make sure the board of directors at his agency knows exactly what kind of man they've been trusting with their business. I was hoping you'd say that. Mr. Moreland, your wife has made a serious mistake. She's chosen to have an affair with a man whose wife has more money, more connections, and more patience for revenge than she does. Clay will survive this scandal because men like him always do. But your wife will be destroyed by it, because women like her always are. I left Patricia's house feeling optimistic for the first time in weeks. Jenna thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers, but she was about to discover that I'd been playing chess all along. That evening, Jenna came home late again, full of apologies and excuses about a client crisis that had kept her at the office. I listened to her lies with a straight face, nodding sympathetically and offering to make her dinner. You're being awfully understanding about my work schedule lately, she said, studying my face for signs of suspicion. I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about being supportive of your career. Maybe I have been too focused on my own problems. She relaxed slightly. I'm glad you're seeing it that way. This is a crucial time for me at the agency. Clay is considering promoting me to senior vice president. That's wonderful, honey. You deserve it. If only she knew that Clay would be lucky to still have a job by the end of the week, much less be in a position to promote anyone. I kissed her goodnight and went to bed early, leaving her downstairs with her laptop and her lies. Tomorrow, the real fun would begin. The board meeting at Morrison & Associates was scheduled for Thursday morning. I knew this because Eddie's network of gossips included a cleaning lady who worked in the building and had overheard Patricia Harlan making some very interesting phone calls to board members. I positioned myself in the coffee shop across the street at 9 a.m. with a clear view of the agency's entrance. At 9:15, Patricia arrived in her silver Mercedes, dressed like she was attending a funeral. At 9:30, 3 board members entered the building, all wearing grim expressions. At 9:45, Clay's BMW pulled up to the curb, and he stepped out looking confident and relaxed. He had no idea what was waiting for him upstairs. I ordered another coffee and settled in to wait. The confrontation I'd been planning was still hours away, but I wanted to watch the first act of Clay's downfall in real time. At 11:30, Clay emerged from the building looking like he'd been hit by a truck. His face was pale, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and he was carrying a cardboard box that probably contained his personal belongings. Patricia followed him out, spoke to him briefly on the sidewalk, then got in her car and drove away without looking back. Clay stood on the sidewalk for several minutes, apparently trying to process what had just happened to his life. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. I was too far away to hear the conversation, but I could guess who he was calling. 20 minutes later, Jenna rushed out of the building and ran to Clay's car. They talked frantically for several minutes, their body language screaming panic and desperation. Finally, Clay drove away, leaving Jenna standing alone on the sidewalk looking lost. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time for Phase 2. I drove to Riverside Elementary School and waited in the pickup line with the other parents. When Emma and Jake climbed into my truck, they were full of stories about their week with Grandma and excited to be home. "Is Mom making her famous spaghetti tonight?" Jake asked as we pulled out of the school parking lot. "Actually, I thought we'd order pizza and have a family movie night," I said. "There are some things we need to talk about." That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Jen and I sat in our living room like two fighters sizing each other up before a match. She'd been quiet all evening, clearly shaken by whatever had happened at the agency, but trying to maintain her composure in front of the children. "Rough day at work?" I asked. "Clay was fired," she said simply. "The board accused him of financial irregularities. They're bringing in an outside firm to audit all of our accounts." "That's terrible. What does that mean for you?" "I don't know yet. They've suspended several people pending the investigation." She looked at me carefully. "It's strange timing, don't you think? Just when Clay was about to promote me, someone decides to make accusations about his business practices. You think someone set him up? I think someone with a grudge against Clay decided to cause trouble for him. The question is who?" I leaned back in my chair and smiled. "Well, when you've been screwing over people for as long as Clay has, the list of suspects is probably pretty long." Jenna's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that men who cheat on their wives and steal from their companies usually make a lot of enemies along the way. You know about Clay and me." It wasn't a question. She'd finally figured out that I wasn't as stupid as she'd thought. "I've known for months, Jenna. I know about the affair. I know about the money you've been stealing. And I know about your plan to divorce me and take the kids away." She stood up abruptly, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "I don't know what you think you know, but sit down." My voice was quiet but firm. "We're going to have this conversation whether you want to or not." She remained standing, her arms crossed defensively. "If you have something to say it." I pulled out my phone and played the recording Frank had made of her conversation with Clay at the beach house. Her voice filled the room, talking about how pathetic I was, how she couldn't wait to be rid of me and the kids, how she was planning to take me for everything. The color drained from her face as she listened to her own words. When the recording ended, she sank back into her chair. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter? The point is, I have it, along with photographs, financial records, phone logs, and enough evidence to destroy both you and Clay in court. What do you want?" "I want you gone, out of this house, away from my children, and out of my life, tonight." "You can't just throw me out. I have rights." "Actually, I can. This house is in my name only. I bought it before we were married, remember? And given your adultery and the evidence I have of your criminal activities at the agency, I don't think you'll have much luck claiming spousal support." Jenna was quiet for a long moment, probably calculating her options and realizing she didn't have many. "What about Emma and Jake? What about them? According to that recording, you don't want custody anyway." "I never said that. You said you'd be too busy with your new life to worry about soccer practice and parent-teacher conferences. That sounds like abandonment to me." She started to cry. but I wasn't moved. These weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity from someone who'd been caught and was facing consequences for the first time in her life. Alec, please, we can work this out. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. No, Jenna, we can't. You didn't make a mistake. You made a series of deliberate choices to betray me, our children, and everything we built together. There's no coming back from that. So what happens now? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet neighborhood. Now you pack a bag and leave. Tomorrow, you'll receive divorce papers. You can contest them if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it. The evidence I have will make you look like an unfit mother and a criminal. Your best bet is to sign the papers and disappear quietly. And if I don't, I turn back to face her. Then I'll release everything to the local newspaper, the State Bar Association, and anyone else who might be interested in your story. Your career will be over, your reputation will be destroyed, and you'll probably face criminal charges for your role in Clay's embezzlement scheme. She stared at me for a long moment, probably seeing me clearly for the first time in our marriage. The mild-mannered husband she'd taken for granted was gone, replaced by someone who was willing to fight as dirty as she was. I underestimated you, she said finally. Yes, you did. You thought I was weak because I was kind. You thought I was stupid because I trusted you. You thought I'd just roll over and let you destroy our family because I loved you. I walked to the front door and opened it. You were wrong about all of it. Jenna packed 2 suitcases and loaded them into her car without another word. As she was about to drive away, she rolled down her window. The kids will ask questions. I'll tell them the truth, that their mother chose her career over her family and decided she didn't want to be part of our lives anymore. That's not fair. Neither was cheating on your husband and planning to abandon your children. But life isn't fair, Jenna. You taught me that. She drove away without another word. I stood in the doorway for several minutes, breathing in the cool Maine air and feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Tomorrow I'd have to explain to Emma and Jake why their mother was gone. It would be the hardest conversation of my life, but at least it would be honest. No more lies, no more pretending, no more practicing for when she was gone. She was finally gone. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, difficult conversations with the kids, and adjusting to life as a single father. Emma took the news about her mother better than I'd expected, probably because she'd sensed the tension in our house for months. Jake was harder to console, but even he seemed to understand that Mom had made choices that hurt the family. Is she coming back? He asked one evening as I was tucking him into bed. I don't think so, buddy. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Sometimes adults make decisions that don't make sense to kids. Did she leave because of something I did? No, Jake, this has nothing to do with you or Emma. Your mom made some grown-up mistakes, and now she has to live with the consequences. He seemed satisfied with that explanation, at least for now. I knew there would be more questions as he got older, but for now, he was content to focus on the things that hadn't changed. School, friends, and the stability of our home. The divorce proceedings went smoothly, largely because Jenna's lawyer advised her not to contest my terms. The evidence Frank had gathered was overwhelming, and any attempt to fight for custody or alimony would have resulted in a public trial that would have destroyed what was left of her reputation. Clay Harlan wasn't as lucky. The audit of Morrison and Associates revealed that he'd been embezzling money for over 2 years, using the funds to finance his lavish lifestyle and impress his various mistresses. He was arrested on federal fraud charges and eventually sentenced to 3 years in prison. His wife divorced him and kept the house, the cars, and most of his assets. Jenna managed to avoid criminal charges by cooperating with the investigation and providing evidence against Clay. But her career in marketing was over. Word of her involvement in the embezzlement scheme spread quickly through Rivermouth's business community, and no reputable company would hire her. I heard through Eddie's gossip network that she'd moved to Boston and was working as a waitress while trying to rebuild her life. Part of me felt sorry for her, but mostly I felt relieved that she was no longer my problem. The kids and I settled into a new routine. I hired a part-time babysitter to help with after-school care, and Emma stepped up to help with household responsibilities. Jake joined the Little League team, and Emma started taking piano lessons. We were building a new life together, one that was honest and stable and free from the toxicity that had poisoned our home. Business at Moreland Custom Printing actually improved after Jenna left. Word of my situation had spread through the community, and several local businesses started bringing their printing jobs to me as a show of support. I hired another part-time employee and began expanding our services. One evening in late spring, about 6 months after Jenna had left, I was working late at the shop when Frank Morrison stopped by. "How are you holding up?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Better than I expected. The kids are doing well, business is good, and I'm sleeping through the night for the first time in years." "Any regrets about how you handled things?" I thought about that for a moment. "No, Jenna made her choices and I made mine. She chose to betray our family for a man who was using her. I chose to protect my children and preserve what was left of our lives. You could have handled it differently, tried counseling, given her a second chance. Frank, you heard that recording. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning to destroy me and abandon our children. There's no coming back from that level of betrayal." He nodded slowly. "You're probably right. I've seen a lot of marriages destroyed by infidelity, and the ones that survive usually involve people who are genuinely remorseful and willing to do the work to rebuild trust. Your wife wasn't either of those things." "No, she wasn't. She was just sorry she got caught." Frank stood up to leave. "Well, for what it's worth, I think you handled the situation with more class than most men would have. You could have destroyed her completely, but you gave her a chance to walk away with some dignity. I didn't do it for her. I did it for my kids. Someday they're going to ask questions about their mother, and I want to be able to tell them that I tried to handle things in a way that wouldn't hurt them any more than necessary." After Frank left, I locked up the shop and drove home through the quiet streets of Rivermouth. The house was dark except for the porch light I'd left on, and I could hear the ocean in the distance. Emma and Jake were spending the weekend with my mother, so I had the place to myself. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the back deck looking up at the stars. 6 months ago, I'd been sitting in the same spot, wondering if my marriage was worth saving. Tonight I knew that some things couldn't be saved, but that didn't mean they couldn't be replaced with something better. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment I wondered if it might be Jenna, but it was just Eddie confirming our Monday morning meeting with a new client. I deleted the message and put the phone away. I wasn't practicing for when anyone was gone anymore. I was living for the people who were still here, and that was enough. 2 years later, I thought the Jenna chapter of my life was closed forever. The kids had adjusted well to our new normal, my business was thriving, and I'd even started dating again. Nothing serious, but it felt good to remember that there were honest, trustworthy women in the world. Then Maya Rodriguez showed up at my shop on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. Maya had been Jenna's best friend and closest confidant at Morrison & Associates. She'd also been the one who'd covered for Jenna during her affair, providing alibis and helping to maintain the deception that had nearly destroyed my family. I hadn't seen her since the divorce, and I wasn't particularly happy to see her now. "Hello, Alec," she said, shaking the rain from her umbrella. "Do you have a few minutes to talk? Depends on what you want to talk about." "Jenna," I looked up from the invoice I was preparing. "What about her?" "She's in trouble. Serious trouble. That's not my problem anymore, Maya. She owes money to some very dangerous people who don't care that she's the mother of 2 children. I set down my pen and studied Maya's face. She looked genuinely frightened, which was unusual for someone who'd always struck me as calculating and self-serving. What kind of people? The kind who break legs first and ask questions later. Jenna got involved with a loan shark in Boston when she couldn't find legitimate work. She owes them $50,000, and they're threatening to hurt her if she doesn't pay. How is this my problem? Because she's planning to come back to Rivermouth and ask you for the money. She thinks you owe her something because of how the divorce turned out. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. She thinks I owe her? After what she did to our family? I know how it sounds, but she's desperate. And desperate people do stupid things. Like getting involved with loan sharks in the first place. Maya nodded. I tried to talk her out of it, but she wouldn't listen. She said she'd rather deal with criminals than come crawling back to you. Smart choice. Because if she shows up here asking for money, she's going to be very disappointed. Alec, I know you have every right to hate her, but she's still the mother of your children. If something happens to her, it's because of choices she made. I didn't force her to cheat on me. I didn't force her to steal money from her employer, and I didn't force her to borrow money from loan sharks. Those were all her decisions. Maya was quiet for a moment, probably trying to think of another angle to work. What if she tries to take the kids? That got my attention. What do you mean? She's been talking about how she made a mistake giving up custody. She thinks if she can get Emma and Jake back, She can use them as leverage to get money from you. The idea of Jenna trying to kidnap my children sent a cold spike of fear through my chest. She'd signed away her parental rights as part of the divorce settlement, but that didn't mean she couldn't try to take them. When is she planning to come back? This weekend. She's driving up from Boston on Saturday. I thought about my options. I could call the police, but they probably couldn't do anything until Jenna actually committed a crime. I could send the kids to stay with my mother, but that would only be a temporary solution. Or I could confront Jenna directly and make it clear that any attempt to interfere with my family would have serious consequences. Maya, I want you to give Jenna a message from me. Tell her that if she comes anywhere near my children, if she even thinks about trying to take them, I will destroy her completely. Not just financially, but personally and legally. I still have all the evidence from her affair and the embezzlement case, and I'm not afraid to use it. She won't listen to threats. Then tell her it's not a threat. It's a promise. Maya left without another word, and I spent the rest of the day making preparations. I called Frank Morrison and asked him to keep an eye on the house over the weekend. I contacted my lawyer and made sure all of my custody documents were in order. And I had a long conversation with Emma and Jake about what to do if their mother showed up unexpectedly. Saturday morning came and went without incident. The kids played in the yard while I worked on some projects around the house, keeping one eye on the street and my phone close at hand. By evening, I was beginning to think that Maya had been wrong about Jenna's plans. Then, at 9 o'clock, headlights turned into my driveway. I looked out the window and saw a beat-up Honda Civic that I didn't recognize. The driver's door opened and Jenna stepped out. She looked terrible, thin, pale, and wearing clothes that had seen better days. The confident, polished woman who'd left my house 2 years ago had been replaced by someone who looked desperate and defeated. I met her at the front door before she could ring the bell and wake the kids. "Hello, Alec." "Jenna, Maya said you might be coming by. Can we talk?" "We can talk right here. I don't want you in my house." She flinched at the coldness in my voice, but pressed on. "I need your help." "I figured as much. The answer is no. You don't even know what I'm going to ask for. You're going to ask for money. Money to pay off the loan sharks who are threatening you because you made another series of bad decisions. The answer is still no." "I'm the mother of your children, Alec. Doesn't that mean anything to you? You stopped being the mother of my children when you signed away your parental rights. You're just a stranger who used to live here." Tears started flowing down her cheeks, but I felt no sympathy for her. These were the same manipulative tears she'd use during our marriage whenever she wanted something. "Please, Alec, I know I made mistakes, but I'm trying to turn my life around. I just need a chance to get back on my feet." "You had a chance. You had a husband who loved you, children who adored you, and a comfortable life. You threw it all away for a man who was using you. I know that now. I know I was wrong about everything, but I can't change the past. I can only try to build a better future. Then build it somewhere else, away from me and away from my children. They're my children too. No, they're not. You gave up that right when you abandoned them for your affair. You don't get to come back now and play the mother card because you're in trouble." Jenna's tears turned to anger, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the manipulative woman I'd married. "You turned them against me. You poisoned them with lies about what happened. I told them the truth, that you chose your career and your lover over your family, that you didn't want to be bothered with the responsibilities of being a mother. Those weren't lies, Jenna. Those were your own words. I was upset when I said those things. I didn't mean them. You meant them, and even if you didn't, it doesn't matter now. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." She stood there for several minutes, probably trying to think of another angle to work. Finally, she played her last card. "If you don't help me, I'll tell Emma and Jake that you forced me to leave, that you threatened me and made it impossible for me to be part of their lives." I smiled, and she took a step backward. "Go ahead, tell them whatever you want. They're old enough now to understand the difference between truth and manipulation. And if you try to poison their minds against me, I'll make sure they hear the recording of you talking about how pathetic they were and how you couldn't wait to be rid of them." The fight went out of her then. She sagged against her car, looking older than her 40 years. "What am I supposed to do, Alec? These people will hurt me if I don't pay them." "That's not my problem. You got yourself into this mess. You can get yourself out of it." "I have nowhere else to turn." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you destroyed your marriage and your career for a man who's now sitting in federal prison." I turned to go back into the house, then paused. "Jenna, if you ever come back here, if you ever try to contact my children, or interfere with our lives in any way, I will call the police and have you arrested for harassment. And then I'll release all of the evidence from your affair and the embezzlement case to every newspaper and website in New England. Your life is already ruined, but I can make it much, much worse." She got back in her car without another word and drove away. I watched her taillights disappear down the street, then went inside and checked on Emma and Jake. They were both sound asleep, safe and secure in the home we'd built together after their mother had abandoned them. I poured myself a drink and sat on the back deck, listening to the ocean and thinking about the conversation I'd just had. 2 years ago, I might have felt sorry for Jenna. I might have given her money or tried to help her out of her latest crisis. But I'd learned something important about people like her. They never change. They just find new ways to manipulate and new people to use. Jenna had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. That wasn't my fault, and it wasn't my responsibility to fix. My responsibility was to my children and to the life we were building together. I finished my drink and went to bed, sleeping soundly for the first time in days. I never saw Jenna again, and I never found out what happened to her debt problems. Frankly, I didn't care. I was done practicing for when she was gone. She was gone, and we were better off without her.